Welcome, everybody. This is Avoiding the Addiction Affliction, brought to you by Westwards Consulting, the Kenosha County Substance Use Disorder Coalition, and by a grant by the state of Wisconsin's Dose of Reality Real Talks remind you that opioids are powerful drugs and that one pill can kill. I'm Mike McGowan. Like a lot of folks, Dr. Tony Dice learned to bury the pain. He buried all of it. In recovery, he learned to cope with the feelings, and in his professional life, he has specialized in treating populations who have traditionally shown an increased level of resistance to treatment that is founded in a distrust of supporting systems. Dr. Dice is CEO and owner of Bishop and Dice Defense LLC, empowering veterans, law enforcement, and first responders. As a Navy SEAL, therapist, paramedic, and firefighter, his memoir, After the Trident, and it's terrific, reveals the transformative power of his holistic change model designed to heal the invisible wounds of those who serve. His story is both remarkable and inspirational. Welcome, Dr. Dice.
Hey, thank you, Mike. It's so good to be here, man. What an honor.
Yeah,
Appreciate
well,
it.
thanks. That's nice of you to say. Late in your book, you say, everything that broke me also built
Mm,
me. Let's get a
mm.
sense of that life before we get into your present, because your your young life is amazing. Your parents, is it all right to just say your parents had issues?
Oh, man. Yeah. And it's, I go all the way back in this book
Yeah, you
because
do.
the programming that took place, that so much comes to light when you're working with someone in addiction. It's all of that is your programming, your upbringing. So, in order to find empathy for a character, you need to kind of understand where that character came from. And so, with my parents, in my book, I refer to my mom was the thunder, and my dad was the lightning, because my mom was very vocal, very loud. She liked to yell. She did like the wooden spoon, as a disciplinary action. But my dad, I mean, he had these two modes. He abused substances, so he was either this high dad that was happy, or there was this sober dad that was stern and a very, very, very intense disciplinarian. I mean, he had this change he would do. Like, he would sit down with you and it'd be very calm and direct and tell you exactly how you screwed up, and
Mm.
then he would switch into this berserk, kind of beat the shit out of you mode. So you were like, yeah. But what that did for me is, instead of me just becoming a good kid, I became a super high risk tolerance. I would just up my
Oh,
sneaky game, and then like, I'm never going to get caught again. And I would just, elevate my skill set. So I had that going on. And with my mom, she had a lot of sayings that she'd always say. Like, she would say things like, she was very Catholic, like the truth always wins. And she would say things like, I have eyes in the back of my head, or I can always tell when you're lying. And even as a young kid, I would test these theories, and I go,
you
well,
did.
I got away with stuff and you didn't catch me, so that's not accurate.
Is that the double legacy you're talking about when you say your parents left you a double legacy?
Yes, yes. They modeled some good behaviors a lot. And my mom, I'm not going to shortchange them. My mom just 8 kids, give her props for that. She encouraged us all. She would say, you can do anything you want, just start. Made us all feel incredibly special. My dad was his incredible imagination, super gifted woodworker, talented. So we got a lot of those skills, creativity and ingenuity skills, but this other legacy of, the dark side, like, there is a whole other world that we keep secret. And that kind of builds and builds and builds and builds throughout our lives.
Where were you in the birth order of the eight?
I was number one.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting spot to be, right? Because I think
Hmm.
you see it all. How did you handle what did you see your mom doing to handle your dad's addiction? Like, how did she handle it, and what legacy did that leave you? Like, what did you watch her do?
Oh gosh. With my dad, she was constantly using my dad as a threat. Just wait till your dad gets home, you're
Yeah,
gonna get it. And you were like, here he comes. But you know, being a little kid, we internalize everything. And so
yeah.
they tried hiding their blowouts from us. But there are many times I remember having my brothers and sisters, and we're all under the bed in the bedroom hiding because they're yelling at each other. And we're sneaking the telephone in there and calling our grandparents, come get us. We were scared. So they tried to shield us from it, but the household is aware of the dysfunction. And the kids, I took it as like, oh, they're yelling about something I did. I'm in trouble. Like they're going to come and get me next. So I really thought a lot of the stress my mom was going through was because of me.
Huh. I watched Dr. Dice. I watched my mom wait till my dad passed out and then go through his pockets, and you learn everything, right? And how they
Yes.
handle it. The whole message is keep the peace. And so sometimes that double legacy is they say one thing and then you see them doing another.
Oh, I see what you're saying there. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't witness that so much, but I do know that this knot we get when we do something wrong.
Yeah.
I learned that as an early age, that how to hold that pain. And that was just something that, I talk about. My dad kept a lot of cash in his pocket and talking about, you fishing money out of mom fishing money out of the pockets. But I remember my dad, when he would pass out on the bed, I would, as he snored, I would crawl across the floor, and I'd move a little bit and then I'd be still. But I'd get my hand up into his jeans pocket and I'm fishing out a couple dollars. And just if I were to get caught, I would be dead.
Yep.
but, but that knot in your chest that when you're just about to get caught, that tightness, I remember that vividly, and I've had that my whole life
Yeah.
up until I got in found recovery. But that's something that you learn to carry, that tightness.
Well, that
Yeah.
that risk taking you just talked about, it permeates the first part of your book big time. For those of you who will read the book, you will instantly recognize Dr. Dice because everyone knew a kid like you. Everyone. You were, if that's right to say, you were what my mom would have called a handful, right?
uh, that's,
And and not just at home, but in school. When you were in school, you cut a lot of
mhm.
corners.
Yeah, yeah. Mom pulled us out early on for homeschooling. I think she believed the Catholic Church wasn't Catholic enough, and she pulled us out of school. And this was back when homeschooling was taboo, so we were deathly afraid growing up the truant officer was going to come get us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thought what was fascinating about that is you didn't give up when you were homeschooled. You wanted to see if you were keeping up, right? So talk about the questions that you ask other kids when you bump into them.
Mhm. My mom told us once she'd give us the textbooks. And I love my mom, Mom. I love you. You're not a great teacher. And like,
Right,
sorry,
right.
right. But she would give us textbooks and give us worksheets, and she would literally say, learn or be stupid. It's up to you. And so I had this fear that I'm gonna be stupid. And when we were like going on like a road trip anywhere, if I saw another kid at like a gas station who was my age, I would walk up to him and I would ask him like math questions or history questions, trying to see if I was at the same level as them, trying to figure out, am I stupid or not? The isolation, I mean, it has an effect on you, not having a peer group to know where you stand.
Well, and you weren't stupid.
Well, I didn't know that then, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kept plugging away. Your memoir is one amazing chapter after another. We could just keep going, but let's fast forward to the SEALs.
Sure.
How, when you're cutting all the corners and bumping into difficulties, did the military provide you some structure that allowed you to have an outlet for those things?
Let's see, the military. There was two things the military gave me that I loved right off the bat. I loved, like some stability and knowing where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. That was pretty okay. I can do this pretty easily. But the second thing was the relationship with alcohol. Oh my
Mm,
gosh.
mm.
I mean, it is in the military, it's like any drinking I had done before had turned pro. These guys knew how to play the game. You drink to indoctrinate, you drink to elevate, you drink to, commemorate, you drink to separate. I mean, it's the love language of the military. And I always carried a flask with me anywhere I went because if anyone had a problem with anything, I could sit down and be the hero. Here, buddy, let's get through this. It's this emotional currency that's it's uniformly accepted across all services. I mean, I loved the tradition the military held with alcohol, and it was I took to that rather well. I always had a flask on me. I always was the first to like do shots. And that the military gave me this Swiss Army knife of emotions, how to deal with them. And I really like, whoa, I found something here.
Well, you became a SEAL. You don't just join the SEALs. You have to compete to
Yes,
get into SEALs.
you
That's not
do.
easy.
No, and I'll describe this kind of captures where I was. I grew up on the mountains of Northern California on the Klamath River. So I knew how to jump and swim in currents, and I was pretty adept in the water. And so I thought I was pretty good. I show up at the Buds, the Navy SEAL training, and there's 180 guys in our class, and all of them are the big fish from their little ponds. I mean, big
Yeah.
fish. Some guys didn't go to the Olympics that year because they wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Division I athletes. They had just these people that all look like studs. They had the sunglasses and the big muscles, and they looked like Navy SEALs. And statistically, in the next 6 weeks, 80% of these guys are going to quit something that they swore they would die before they quit. So what's that fear of, like, what have we gotten into? What's about to happen? That kind of anxiety going in was huge. And then watching people change their life goals, watching dreams crash, it was intense. And so it's everything the books write about. It lived up to its reputation. It was tough.
Did you ever feel like ringing the bell?
Oh yeah. In fact, I talked about, because I started out in class 212. I got medically rolled back to 219, and I was such a secret guy. I was trying to hide injuries. I was in my first hell week, and I'm trying to hide dislocated shoulder, and Trill's trying to keep up. And are you fine? I'm fine. Well, you got to get under the boat. Like, my arm would keep falling out of socket as I'm trying to get on the boat. Are you going to quit? No, and then that dragged on. Eventually I couldn't keep up, and then the boat's going on without me, and they're pulling me back, and I still wouldn't tell them about my shoulder. And then they're like, you got to ring the bell. I had to stand there and I had to ring the bell. And that was just, afterwards I went into medical, and they're like, why'd you ring the bell? So they
Yeah.
medically rolled me back to another class, and I graduated 219. So I got to go through hell week twice.
Oh, great. Yeah, there
Happy
you
me.
go.
Yeah. Bonus. Yeah.
Well, how do you go from carrying a flask to, well, at one point in the book, you say everybody was watching Breaking Bad. I was living it. How do you go from flask to meth?
Yes, crystal meth. Let's see. My journey through addiction has shown me that it's always wanting more.
Hmm.
My drinking escalated. And in the SEAL teams, we party hard. But there's a function of you being a SEAL. You want to keep your game face on. You don't want to lose control. You're a control freak. And so if you start getting too tipsy, I quickly learned a couple bumps of cocaine, boop, straightens right out. I can keep on partying. So this became a utility, the Coke. Bum, 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 bum. I'm not recommending this, but back then, if I wanted to drink and drive, that's how I will roll. But today, knowing what I know now and watching that escalate, it was a train wreck. Knock on wood, nothing. I didn't get pulled over back then, or didn't get in any alcohol or drug related incidences, but it was escalating. And then cocaine led to the ecstasy years, and the ecstasy years were crazy. By this time in the teams, I was dodging drug tests. I was like, whoa, got lucky there. My name didn't get called. This was all pre 9/11. So there was no war going on. I have all this training. I've been training for war. I want war. We're getting spun up and going on deployments, and nothing's happening. And it's when someone like me, have you ever been to a concert and you see some idiot climbing like the sound?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
up there, that's me. I'm going to get into mischief and get into trouble. And I was doing that. And the SEALs, I was, goofing off, doing crazy stuff on deployments. I was a time bomb. And so with drug and alcohol escalating, I ended up, my reenlistment was coming up, and I could say, something bad is going to happen. And I elected to punch out. I got out of the military. People who've been through this can identify what I'm about to share. The veteran population, those who have enlisted and served, we believe strongly in the value of freedom. We love the idea of freedom in our society. But when you enlist in the military, you are giving up so much freedom. I mean, freedom of movement, freedom of what you're saying, freedom of everything, accountability. You give up so much freedom until the day you get out. And then you're given back all this freedom. And for me, I was a paramedic firefighter, Navy SEAL. That's 10 years of service where those were all giving up freedoms. And now I'm being released from captivity. I remember that feeling of I can do whatever the F I want. I
Mm.
mean, I was just this like you took an animal out of a cage and I went go. And that's where you see the drug use takes this radical whoop,
Hmm.
going out. And cocaine gets expensive, Mike. I'm here to say cocaine's a hell of a habit. Crystal meth was a financial decision. When I tried it out the first time, I'm like, whoa. And it lasts 6, 7 times as long and cheaper. It was a financial move. It got its hooks in me, and I was off and running.
Yeah, a lot of bottoms. There's for those of you watching this on YouTube, it's clear that Dr. Dice is in really good shape. But there's a photo of you with your son in the book.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at you now, that photo, you're unrecognizable. You can see
Oh,
what meth does.
I'm 90 pounds lighter in that picture. I'm 220 now. I was 130 pounds in that photo. At 6'2", that's a hell of a weight loss program. They call it the STEM Fast program. But yeah, that was 2 weeks before my bottom. That picture was taken. And it's funny how denial works. You can't see it. Everyone else around you is going, "What's wrong with you, Dice? What's going on?" I remember getting turned down for a contract. I was like basically a mercenary in that time period of my life. And I remember getting turned down, and that hits your ego, which just triggers more use. I was spiraling at that point.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool things in your book, but one of the parts I like the best, and I hope it's all right to say this, I'm not
Sure.
spoiling
No, you're not
anything. I'm
spoiling
not,
anything.
is uh, being reimbursement being what it is. You're told, okay, you need to pay this much or you can't stay in treatment. And Dr. Dice, you actually left treatment to sell your car to go back into treatment. I got to tell you, I ran treatment centers. If you would have said, I got to leave here, Mike, to go sell my car to come back to pay you the bill, I would have said, okay, we won't see him for a while. But you actually did that. You followed through.
Yeah, I mean, there was a moment, and this was about 4 days into my treatment, and I was still like, didn't want to be here. I was in and out, in and out. And there was a moment of me being in the little small group, and I'm just kind of spaced out, not paying attention. I'm looking out the window, and there was this moment of like, I hate who I've become. I can't stand this person. There's a chance maybe this recovery shit will work. Maybe. And it was like a forced kind of perspective, like those Viewmaster things when you pull the lever and a little slide flicks over when we were kids. It
Yeah.
was like my world went, it went from hopeless to maybe this will work. And I remember that was like a little bit of hope of maybe change. A couple days later, the insurance was up and they're asking me to leave
Yeah.
the treatment center. And I called everyone. No one would give me a loan for money. If I leave here, I'm going to relapse. I know it. And I went to my therapist and I said, I need a 4 hour pass. And his first thought was similar to yours. His first thought was, oh, you're going to go rob a bank, aren't you? He thought that was my next decision making, which made sense. But I said, no, I want to go try selling my car. And he gave me a 4 hour pass. And when I got that check, Mike, I was in the parking lot of CarMax. I'm sure they ripped me off, but it was enough to cover treatment. And I did look at that check and I said, I don't have to go back.
Right.
Yeah, this is a good run. I was already picturing the hotel room I was going to go to, who I was going to call. But I had that little moment of maybe, man. And that little moment, I hung on. I said, I want to be different. This might be my ticket. I didn't even cash that check. I didn't trust myself going to the bank. I went straight back to the treatment center, said, can I endorse this over to you? And they accepted it as payment. Just
That
crazy.
there's so much in it. I could do a whole podcast on just that 4 hours in itself because there's
Mm-hmm.
some triggers and decisions and it's unbelievable. That's just
Defining
unbelievable.
moments, man. Defining moments.
Well, and then in treatment, you have to learn finally to address all those things as a kid. You said, and boy, this resonated with me, and I bet it would with tons of people, especially men. At your dad's funeral, your grandpa said,
Mm-hmm.
"Men don't cry." Well, really? No kidding. But now you have to face some of those feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was a colonel in the Air Force, so he's old school. And yeah, he said, men don't cry, suck it up,
Yeah,
and you're the man now.
yeah.
And
You're the man.
you're the man now. And that you said two things there. I don't remember crying after that. But the second thing, it kind of kicked off this I gotta be the man kind of fire. Like I gotta be the hero of the day. And that kind of led to this firefighter, paramedic, Navy SEAL kind of trying to find the top, the biggest, baddest guy I could be. Yeah.
Well, and then, we'll fast forward. We could again do a whole season. Maybe we will talk about your holistic change model.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that? And talk about it. Because
Sure, sure, sure.
you attach it to the 12 steps, which I
I
think is
did.
fascinating.
I went through a 12-step recovery program. And I also was completing my master's and I went back to work as a therapist in that same treatment center. And then I had this like, how does this happen? I'm working as a therapist and a counselor, so I know theory and I'm under strike. How did so much change occur in just the space of a year? Everything about me changed. And as I went back for my PhD, which, that's a program that makes you question everything, I began to really look at this 12-step recovery. Like, what is going on? And these underlying theories were kind of merged. It's almost like it's always been there. I just brushed off the 1935 jargon it was written in.
Hmm.
And the first three steps are just basically stages of change, and therapists and counselors out there know what I'm talking about. Steps 4 and 5 are narrative therapy. It's just this processing and restructuring and repackaging owning our story, having empathy for ourselves. You roll in steps 6, 7, 8, and 9. That's all cognitive behavioral therapy. All of it's changing behavior modification, repairing past wounds, and all of that. And then the last three steps 10, 11, and 12 are all existential therapy,
Yeah.
finding our place in the world, finding a purpose, all of that. So these are what was important to me is like if I'm a therapist or a counselor and I'm working with a patient who's in a 12-step recovery program, now I know what tools best support where they are in that phase of recovery.
Oh, well, and there's a reason why they're the 12 steps, right? You don't start self-actualizing when you're 6'2", 110 pounds on crystal meth.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, and it's the progression. Every one of these therapeutic models can work and has as evidence-based practice, it does their job. But when done in this order, when you go stage to change, narrative, CBT, existential, that seems to have traction with the people in addiction. It just that progression works for this. So this call it a theoretical model, but this seems to be like the magic sauce for people in recovery. And the flip side of this, there is a lot of people I run into who are just completely averse to 12-step recovery
Yeah,
programs,
yeah.
and it's because, I'll be honest, it sounds and presents like a cult. We,
Mm.
we meet in the basements of churches and use anonymous names and have secret handshakes and hugs. And it's just all, we follow these guidelines set out by our forefathers. It's a non-religious program that starts and ends with a prayer. It's
Hmm.
very controversial for some. Well, the holistic change model, if done through a therapist, can provide an alternative way to access these same therapeutic principles.
Well, and you start out, I think everybody the whole one day at a time. And I have, I'm sure you were like this too. A lot of people say one day, give me 10 minutes at a time, give me 1 hour at a time.
That's right.
How long was it before you could see the bigger picture where you weren't just going day to day, I'm not going to use today?
Well, as with most people, others begin to notice it before I noticed it
Yeah,
myself.
right.
Yeah. But I did, there's a moment that for me, and this was for my moment, about 3 months in, I became aware that I did not think about using today. And I remember calling my sponsor and saying, and I didn't even want to say it loud because I didn't want to jinx it.
Right.
I was like, I don't think I thought about using it. I was very like, is it going to come back? And because it does take some time for the reprogramming. It takes, it took decades to program me to get this way. Yeah. I was surprised that so much could happen so quickly in that first year to deprogram us.
Well, while you're living your life and doing all the things from Navy SEAL to firefighter to paramedic, you know, now you can say you say I was always trying to be the big guy, right? Well, I don't know that you saw that at the time. It's in hindsight that you see that bigger picture. about how your mom influenced you, how your dad
Hmm.
influenced you, your grandpa, your circumstances.
Yeah.
And I think people search for that before they're actually doing the right thing. That's probably a poor way to put it, but you
Well,
know,
and you kind of hit the nail on the head there, because what I did in my book is I'd write the chapter
Mhm.
as I remember it. And at the end of the chapter, I would reflect saying, hey, this is how this is and how it affected me. And then I'd circle it back to the holistic change model. But if someone were to read this, it's almost like an example of how you might do a self examination of your own lifestyle. Like, oh, wow, I never thought about my interaction with my parent that way would have that kind of effect in my future. So it's an example of some self reflection that someone might do for themselves.
I really like that part of your book, Dr. Dice. It was interesting because at the end of a chapter, instead of flipping to the next chapter, I found myself thinking, like, okay, I can see what he's talking about here. I can see that connection. You can see, so there's a forward to it too, where it's like, here's the way it's gonna turn out based on what he's doing.
Awesome.
Talk about, it's also remarkable. So being homeschooled, here's the books, go for it. And just running
Hmm.
around the hills of Northern California
Yes,
to a
up the freedom.
doctorate, to a doctorate. Come on.
So,
That's remarkable.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of being obsessive and compulsive tied into that.
Well, I wanted to ask you though, because you talked about being at the gas station and asking those kids all along the way when you got your GED and then bachelor's and then master's, and was there a sense of that imposter syndrome that so many people
Oh
talk
yeah.
about?
Oh yeah. I mean, my entire life there's been that imposter syndrome. It's funny that creativity and having some ingenuity and being a little sneaky, all that's a cool mix for like finding the crevice and slipping through it, and or getting it done in the nick of time, or all those little recipes I've had that's helped me succeed. But also on the subtext is, well, you wouldn't have succeeded if you would have done it like everyone else. So I kept getting through systems, like accomplishing my tasks, but I would figure out a way so I would make it somehow. And I would not give myself credit for it. I would say, well, you cheated. Well, you cheated. Well, you cheated. And so that imposter syndrome has kind of followed me everywhere. And it wasn't until in recovery that there was this sense of like I wasn't attaching gratitude for my skill sets. And there was also a lot of like, we've all been given different blessings, advantages. The thing is, what are you doing with it? Are you using them for your greater good? Are you using them for selfish means? What are you doing with that? For me, there was a sense of balancing the scales of karma in the universe. There was this definitely, I've been on the take for a long time, and this shifting of, wow, this hole that I have in me has something to do with me being right with the world.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there was like a reckoning that had to be had. I had lived my life up until recovery with the end justifying the means. And then there was a total flip to the script. Coming out of recovery was the means will justify the end.
Oh, wow. When you work with especially men
Mhm.
who, because you talk about first responders in the military and people who have buried the same sorts of feelings you buried, there's a resistance to therapy that is
Oh,
intense. How do you break through that for the
that
therapists that are
resistance is
listening?
thick. It's like you read
Yeah.
about. And here, I'll give you a visual demonstration. For those of you who are just listening, I'm standing here with my dukes up. My fists are up. And this is every law enforcement, first responder, military veteran inside their head. This is how you doing? I'm good. Everything's fine. This is we're on. Our defenses are up. I have not let you in. I don't even trust you yet. I'm just here in my fighting stance. And I can't, Mike, my leg feet are slightly bladed on the floor. I'm slightly angled towards you. My feet are up. I am so comfortable right here. I mean, this is my home right here. Now I'm taking a step back. I'm slowly lowering my arms, opening and extending them out and down by my sides. I do not look or feel comfortable in this position. I have the full front of me exposed. I'm open. This is me being vulnerable.
Hmm.
This is not where I want to be. And I mean, that is a veteran law enforcement first responder mindset, is that it takes a lot to get from here to here where authentic connection can occur. And it takes a lot of trust. It takes you, or you, Eve, any idea what I've been through? Are you one of us? You know, you put me in a group of unknowns, like an anonymous program. I don't know if I arrested you. I don't know if what I share is going to blow your mind and you'll never talk to me again. There's this sense of it, you can't handle the truth. And that takes a while to get through. And so I put together this company, Bishop and Dice Defense, as a vehicle, which its sole purpose is to get through that resistance you're talking about. And what we do is and this sounds crazy, we provide uniform, tactics, training, ammunition to and mental health services. So they may sound like they don't go together, but we'll roll into a police department, fire department, a VA center, and we'll give them the best gear all the gear the team guys are using, ammunition, training. We'll talk shop for a whole year, Mike. We'll go in for a whole year and get to know them and hang out and da 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 da. And on year 2, once there's a relationship built, we'll bring in mental health services. And we'll even bring it in like, listen,
Hey,
hey,
yeah.
you can log in anonymously. You don't have to show your picture. You just want to ask questions. Let's just talk. And that's the beginning of catching them with at least half their guard down. And that's the way we found we've been able to get through these help resistant populations.
It's a way into the door.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And it's so resistant.
Well, and I think, we're not gonna, I don't know that I'll live to see it, but what you're also doing is you're redefining masculinity, to cope with this stuff, to deal with this stuff. And I know there's a lot of women listening, but so hard for men to deal with this when the messages across the spectrum are don't deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not going to take women. We each have our own unique challenges.
Yeah.
Men, women have our own unique challenges to get through to process. And for men, that is one that's socially constructed. It's from a very early age. Handle your shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even in the military, the program is be squared away so that you can help the team. So it's on you to be squared away. And what that means, you suck it up. That means you suck it up. It's the programming is fierce to get you there. In fact, they give it's like a processing camp, a brainwashing facility they call boot camp, where they spend weeks and weeks and weeks deprogramming and reprogramming you with this military mindset. And when you let you out of the military, do they give you a deboot camping? No,
No.
no. It's like, all right, try to use this programming in the normal sector. See how it works out.
Well, and we're seeing some of a lot of veterans are in trouble with mental
Mm-hmm.
health, and we're seeing some of that play out in our society.
Mm-hmm. And the higher suicide rate,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
high association with drug use, alcohol use. I think if I want to say something to the veterans and non-veterans out there, listen, the military is a violent organization. It's designed for war. It's not designed for mental health. In fact, in all our drop-down menus for decision making, when I have to make a decision, I have this little drop-down menu of different options I can choose. Up there somewhere, violence is always an option. That's
Mm.
always an option to any problem that's presented. And when you're released into the civilian sector and there's an argument going on or a dispute, the violence is going to pop up, and I have to talk myself out of the violent option on a regular basis. All right, I got to find another way to interact. Well, that option keeps dropping down, even when you're sober, when you're drunk, when you're high. That violent option is always there. And so when it comes to taking one's life or having those kind of thoughts, that violent option is still popping down. So I think people need to understand that this programming it's not something that just goes away. And it's something that we need to be able to broach. I'm a firm believer that talking about it is not encourage it. In fact, it's the opposite. It needs to be the white elephant in the room that we always get to as quick as possible. So I'm all about let's start a conversation.
Oh, all right. That's a great place to end it right there. Let's start a conversation. I was going to ask you what you hope people take away from your talk, but that's just a great
That's it
summary
right
right there.
there, man. Yeah.
I know we have law enforcement people listening because we've done podcasts with them and first
Yeah.
responders. So as you all know, there's a link to Dr. Dice's contact information Bishop and Dice PsyOps attached to the podcast for both the gear and the mental health. Please
Hmm.
access it as well as the book. Dr. Dice, thanks so much for being with us
Sure. Can
today.
I give you a
Yeah,
shout out to
please,
law enforcement
please.
real quick?
Yeah,
To the law
absolutely.
enforcement population out there who's taken a beating for years now. Listen, I've worked with your population extensively, and I'm going to put this out there. No disrespect, but you guys are going through more than most. In fact, you're a little more twisted than most populations I work with because of this one thing. When a military person deploys, they are in country, they do their bit, they come home, they train, they get, law enforcement, you are never off deployment. You are forever deployed. You
Hmm.
never are actually coming back from the deployment. You are constantly in country. That'd be the equivalent of me going to Afghanistan and looking for mental health services in Afghanistan. How the hell would I trust anyone over there to be on my side or take care of me? The same kind of conversation for you needs to be had. You are on deploy in the US. You do need help. It's going to be an additional layer of challenge for you to find someone to talk to. This is why you're so resistant to deprogramming. I need you to talk to a buddy, talk to anybody. Remember, addiction is the opposite of connection. Addiction is the opposite of connection. We need you to connect with somebody somewhere in some way so you're not alone in this. That's all I ask. Start the conversation.
Wow, great message. Thanks for those of you who are listening and watching. We hope that you find support wherever you are, help wherever you are. Thanks for listening. Be safe. And as Dr. Dice would say, you just have to reach out. It is there for you.